You are now listening to theGrio's Black Podcast Network, Black Culture Amplified. What's going on, everybody? Welcome to Dear Culture, the podcast for, by, and about Black culture. I'm your host, Panama Jackson, and we have a special guest here today I'm excited to talk to because I feel like I've been following your career, probably not the entirety of it. I was a little young, but you've been in movies I love. You've been on shows I love. You have a documentary that I really enjoyed that I think everybody needs to check out. Ladies and gentlemen, please put your digital hands together for actor, comedian, documentarian, historian, as far as I'm concerned, legendary host, Torry. What's going on, brother? How are you doing?
I'm good, man. I'm good. Thanks for having me, man. Good to be here.
Yeah, I appreciate it. I'm glad you're here, too, because, you know, funny enough, you are part of two movies that I really enjoy for very different reasons. One, I don't think it's enough credit. Trippin' is one of my favorite movies like ever. There's so much comedy gold in that film, and I don't think enough people have seen it. I've been trying to find a More Howard shirt for years, and I can't find one anywhere.
Funny.
But also, you're in American History X, which is very serious, and you play one of the most important roles in that film because you effectively helped change the perspective of a skinhead white supremacist, right?
It's funny because Trippin' is one that I always laugh at because it was such a cult classic. I usually get Life and American History X. But Trippin' was a very fun project to do, man, when I was hitting a different girl every night.
Yep. Dude, so much. I love that movie so much. I have the DVD. I bought it on streaming. I tell everybody to watch this movie if they can, if they can find it, because it's such a great movie. Anyway, thank you for your contributions.
I'm going to have to sign a poster and send it to you then.
Oh, listen, I would love that. You have no idea. It would hang up in my house. My wife would be upset, but listen, it's got to go up. We're here to talk today about comedy, past, present, future, and specifically because you have a documentary that you helped produce, that you're a part of. You're the reason why it exists, called Fat Tuesdays. It's the era of hip hop comedy. Did I get the full title correct?
Absolutely. I created it, executive produced it, basically wrote it, and Reggie Hudlin, the great Reggie Hudlin, directed it.
I saw Chris Rock, Chris Tucker,
Martin Lawrence, Jamie Foxx,
Kevin Hart. Every week, sold out.
It was the neighborhood.
For the first time, I was able to do black humor.
Man, this was really our space.
And it's a good piece. It's a great piece that needed to be done.
I'm so glad you said that, because that's why I want to start. Why did you feel the need to create this documentary to begin with? Well,
I created the Fat Tuesday night back in 1995, right? And it was generally just to showcase black comedians because we weren't getting a shot once the Riot and the King riots hit, and once the Comedy Theater kind of lost its luster a little bit. It was the first black comedy club in the country, basically, in South Central Los Angeles. But we weren't getting the looks from Hollywood. So I created this night at the world famous Comedy Store on Sunset Boulevard to do this showcase. And I did it for 10 years, and it went away. And then, I was on a plane, ironically, years later with Michael Blackson, and we were talking about comedy and talking about, he said, man, I miss Fat Tuesdays. These young comics don't know how important that night was. And I didn't really realize it either until he said that. A light bulb went off. And I said, well, I'm a hoarder, like my mom. So when I got back to LA, I went into, the crates, and I started seeing what materials I had. I had old VHS tapes and old, 3/4-inch tapes of shows that I had shot. And I had, certain literature on Fat Tuesdays that I had written notes through the years. And I started putting it together. So I started asking people about Fat Tuesdays, and the comedians, patrons, and even, just fans of Fat Tuesdays and business owners who used to come were saying how much they missed it and there's nothing like it anymore. And that story needs to be told. And so I started gathering all the materials and started shooting little things on myself, with a friend of mine at the time named Bishop Moore. Well, camera guy, up-and-coming director. And we went and just started shooting interviews. And when I saw how important it was to comedians, I was like, wow, okay, I have something here. So I kind of worked on it underground for 9 years. And then about 3 or 4 years ago, I took it to my agency's office after I put the sizzle together, the presentation. For those of you who don't know what a sizzle is, And they were like, wow, you've been sitting on this? And the rest was history. Innovative artists really got behind it, my agency, and we went ham on it.
You know, one thing I really loved about it was how much history that you portrayed. I mean, it's about Fat Tuesdays, but it's how you got to Fat Tuesdays in the first place. And I'm not from LA. I'm 43 now. So I grew up largely in the Def Comedy Jam era. But I didn't know anything about the LA comedy scene and how essential it was to creating, stars out of all these people. Like, I'm one of those people that watches all the black movies. Like, we start talking about tripping. Like, I watch the Three Strikes. I watch anything that has like 3 black people as a starring character. I watch all those things. And it seems like a ton of them got their start in the LA comedy scene. So what was that like in the early 90s? And I'm assuming LA was kind of like the central point for all of this. Or I guess the late 80s, actually, the late 80s and early 90s. Like, what was that scene like for you all back then?
Well, I didn't start comedy until 92. That's when I moved to LA. As a matter of fact, 30 years ago this week is when I packed my little hoopty up from St. Louis, Missouri, grabbed my college roommate, Leon Whitener, and we drove to LA. He helped me drive to LA, and he flew back. And that was 30 years ago this week, the last week of August of 1992. So the scene was kind of desolate for black comedians. You know, the Comedy Act Theater, which was this cotton club for comedy that Robin Harris, the great late Robin Harris, made famous, was not what it used to be because he had passed on and the riots had happened. So it was kind of a ghost town. But on Sunset, it was popping. Not for blacks though. It was popping for white comedians and Jewish comedians, and they were just having a ball. Every once in a while, you see, a brother in there or a sister in there. Every once in a while, every blue moon. So. And we weren't seeing any industry presence, in the hood in South Central coming to see us. So that's what made me take the hood to Hollywood and showcase us. And at that time, comedians that weren't in LA, when they heard about Fat Tuesdays, and this was before social media. There was no social media. I didn't have money for advertising or any of that. So when comics, would come to LA that weren't from LA, they would stay an extra a day. Like if they person left on Sunday or Monday, they'd stay over Tuesday. So and I would let them do Fat Tuesdays. For the comics who didn't live there, they got kind of carte blanche. And they go back to their city, to New York or Chicago or Atlanta or Houston or Miami, be like, yo, man, I got this black room in LA at the Comedy Store popping. When you go out to LA, you got to get on. And they was talking about who was in the audience. Everybody from John Singleton, rest in peace, and Spike Lee and Denzel Washington and Prince. They'll all come. So it was a chance to be seen by your peers, by the Hollywood elites, and also all the agents and managers will flock to it as well.
Before we started recording, we kind of, I made a comment about like black comedy or comedy in general, but you made sure to point out that there's a difference between comedy and black comedy.
Oh, yeah.
And I think that kind of plays all into what Fat Tuesdays was about, what we're even talking about. So what's the difference between just black comedy and comedy?
Black comedy is completely different from just regular comedy. Black comedy is loud, and not in a bad way, but it's loud, it's emotional, it's expressive, it's bold, it's edgy, it's unfiltered, it's unapologetic, it's all of that. And that's what we need to be heard, especially back in the 90s and before. We had to be boisterous like that because we wanted to be heard. And Def Comedy Jam, which I call Moses, took a lot of brothers to the promised land because it put that style of comedy on the map. That's what inspired Fat Tuesdays. There would be no Fat Tuesdays without Def Comedy Jam. And but that's what black comedy is. And black comedy is different because one of the reasons why I had to create Fat Tuesdays too was because we weren't allowed in the white clubs, we do comedy in the hood. I mean, do comedy in the hood, especially in South Central Los Angeles and Inglewood and Long Beach. You got gangbangers coming to the show, and when they come to the show, they gonna heckle you. They think they're funnier than you. So you gotta stand your ground and not be taken out by any heckler. But then when you're involved in a heckler who are a gangbanger, it's a slippery slope because you want to kill them. I mean, not literally, but you want to kill them on stage with jokes, but not too much because you get killed in the parking lot. So many black comedians got beat up, stabbed, or approached after lightning to or shot. Lightning to a gangbanger that came to your comedy show. So you're doing comedy under duress. But at the Comedy Store on Sunset, a lot of those guys didn't come, to Beverly Hills or to West Hollywood or to Hollywood because they had warrants. So you could do comedy north of Wilshire Boulevard, which is kind of the Mason-Dixon line for, hood and Hollywood. You could come there and not need that and not have that pressure. But that's what makes black comedians so aggressive and funnier, because we had to do it with our life on the line, literally a lot of times. So that's the difference between black comedy and white comedy. And our comedy is just so, black people need to laugh the most. That's why we come to comedy clubs the most. We've been through the most shit. And comedy purifies the air. And laughter is healing, Like, and so comedy heals that and take your mind off of the bullshit America puts us through. Or what's going on in your own neighborhood. So that's why black comedy is so different from white comedy. And no knock on white comedy. It's just our comedy's better.
I agree completely. What is it like creating? I mean, you went back to go check out all of, looking at the footage and realizing everything that you all had done, that you created. I mean, taking a look back on that, like you created a movement, you created a space that, based on what I saw in the documentary, like everybody came through. I mean, regular people, celebrities, like everybody was there. Like when you take a look back on that, like what was that feeling like, realizing what you created and how important it was to the culture, to the future for tons of artists, just for everybody who had an opportunity to experience it?
But first of all, it was an assignment from above. There's no way I could have done that on my own. There's doors that God opened that I had no idea was even there, because I'd only been doing comedy for 3 years when I started Fat Tuesdays.
Right.
I started in 92 doing stand-up and started Fat Tuesdays in 1995. I had never ran a business before, never hosted a comedy like my own night before. I was clueless. I was naive. I was young, but I was hungry and just wanted to help out. So, someone told me, on one of my posts about Fat Tuesdays, I was giving all credit to, the man above. And they said, look, when you do something from the heart, and you do it selflessly, God will meet you there. And he definitely did that. So everybody did come to Fat Tuesdays, from icons to ex-cons. You know what I'm saying? We had from hoes to regular Joes. We had, from everybody was at Fat Tuesdays, from the elites to, people who worked the door at certain places. So it didn't matter. Everybody came to laugh. And that's what made Fat Tuesdays so special, that you could be a regular person and be in a booth behind Prince or Denzel or Magic Johnson or Shaq or Kobe. They all came to Fat Tuesdays. And it was like a cookout, a black family reunion mixed with the BET Awards every Tuesday night. It was popping, man. And it was just great to perform in front of your peers, but also have these comedians, man, who were up and coming, and the veterans who came through. You had Cedric, who was new to LA from St. Louis, already was making a name for himself. He used to come through and bless the stage. My brother Joe Torry had made a name for himself already and was blessing the stage. Dave Chappelle, Chris Rock would come through. Eddie Murphy would be sitting in the audience. Richard Pryor would come through. So you had these giants in the audience, man, and then people like Reggie Hudlin, who's the director, come seeing you and like, hey, I like your work. So it was a blessing. It was an assignment, and I'm glad God chose me to be able to conduct this chaotic, beautiful symphony.
So yeah, that's actually one of the things I enjoyed about the doc, especially, was hearing, like, I'm watching celebrities, people that I know and love and grew up watching watching Chappelle and Chris Tucker and all of you talk about the other famous people that used to come in there and be present. Like, it's just amazing. It seemed like the kind of place that everybody would have wanted to be. But interestingly, you mentioned your brother Joe Torry, and I think that's one of the really interesting parts of the doc too. Is, for one, I didn't know anything about you all's relationship, right? I knew Joe Torry. I'm a huge Poetic Justice fan, and I knew Guy Torry. I learned so much about you all's relationship, both from you all talking, from everybody else talking. And I kind of wonder for you, like, what was it like delving into that relationship and talking about it? And I don't know how often you all talk about your relationship. Your brother seemed like he's like that, very much that old guard black man where you don't really talk about the emotions too much and stuff. But I imagine y'all are family, y'all had those conversations. Like, what's it like digging into that relationship through the guise of comedy and the things that you all were doing together, but separately in the same space?
Well, we don't talk about our relationship to each other. We talk about it
Right.
with our siblings and, mutual friends and things like that. But, it was tough. I knew I had to have him in the documentary. He's part of Black comedy history.
Right.
He's one of the pioneers of the Def Jam era. He was the host after Martin, but he was in that first couple of seasons as a performer. And you can't talk the history of Black comedy, especially the era of the 90s, without talking Joe Torry.
Roaches in a hotel. Bullshit. I came in late one night, shit, right? So Roach sitting on my bed in the bathroom smoking a cigarette. Talking about, you got some messages?
You have to. And as a filmmaker, I had to do it. Personally, I didn't have to do a damn thing. But I had to take my personal feelings and put them to the side. And I had to put on my producer hat and my filmmaker hat and say, hey, he's important to this story. And it'd be a crime not to have him in this documentary, regardless of how I feel about him personally. And he was great in it. And I didn't know it would get emotional as it did, but it did. And Reggie Hudlin, who directed it, did a great job, along with Brian Phillips. I mean, they both was just like, wow, that was gold. And it wasn't like, yeah, I'm a great actor, But that wasn't acting. That was just real raw emotion that, that came out. Speaking of it, because I bury it so deep, and then at that time, the suppression just came out at that time, and it's always tough to talk about, because when someone starts off as your mentor and you have them on a pedestal, and you're the reason why they're doing it because they inspired you, and then that relationship turns sour. It's painful to talk about. It's painful to relive. It's painful to even think about. But Reggie Hudlin, being the great director he is, I wasn't going to tell him to leave it in or take it out, because he's a director. Who am I to tell the great Reggie Hudlin what to do?
Yeah. I got to say, it was compelling, man. Like, watching it, it was really, I don't know, it was something to see. Like, if there's a lot to take out of the documentary. Obviously, the history of Black comics in LA, history of Black comics in general. The third episode is largely about, like, even women, like, understanding the role that women were able to play, and how much ensuring that women had a space to perform, right? Because obviously sexism is everywhere, right? Sexism is everywhere, especially in comedy too. But seeing you all's relationship, having a space, I'm just saying, it was, as somebody who grew up on both of y'all, know who y'all are, and not knowing anything about it, it was really interesting. I learned a lot, and I'm appreciative of what I learned. From
a lot of times, it's taboo in the Black community that we don't air our dirty laundry. That's, Black people are. When we tell your family business, man, I give a damn about those rules. I'm a speak, and I want to be transparent, and I want to show people that family fight. Family fight. That's just what happens when you got two, brothers, and they're both A-type personalities, and then one's older and one's younger, and they're both alpha males. You're gonna bump heads. It's gonna happen, and it's just, you deal with it.
Absolutely. All right, we're going to take a real quick break here at Dear Culture. When we come back, we're going to continue more with Guy Torry, talking about Fat Tuesday's documentary. I want to talk about the culture of comedy in LA now and stand-up comedy in general. And we're going to talk about social media and how that impacts comedy. So stay tuned right here on Dear Culture.
The Griot Black Podcast Network is here. Everything you've been waiting for. Black Culture Amplified. Find your voice on the Black Podcast Network. Listen today on the Griot mobile app and tune in everywhere great podcasts are heard.
All right, we're back here on Dear Culture. We're talking to Guy Torry, who has a documentary called Fat Tuesdays that's about Black comedians in LA, but in the culture in general, because if there's one thing that you learn watching this doc, it's how much that era, how much this event, how much this weekly night spawned so many careers. And at least that's my take. That's one of my takeaways from it. How many people that I saw there went on to do amazing things, and how many people showed up for this documentary, which speaks volumes about how important it was. What is the Were there, okay, so Fat Tuesdays ends in 2005. Were there any sibling or offspring of Fat Tuesdays after that? Did people try to build up new comedy shows or weeks or days or anything like that? What happened
first
after?
of all, I mean, the people who showed up for Fat Tuesdays was amazing because we shot during COVID. When everything, LA was shut down. Comedy clubs weren't even open. And everybody had to get COVID tested every day that we had to do on site. We only had a limited amount of people to have on set at one time. And a lot of people were just afraid to come out. You know, we lost some people who we really wanted to interview because they were just too scared to come out because of COVID. But it was a perfect time too because a lot of comedians were home. Normally they'd be traveling or on a movie set, on a TV set, and we would have access. So because we shot during COVID, the Comedy Store was closed, so it was easy to get in the Comedy Store and shoot there because they weren't open. And then it was easier to have access to a lot of comedians because they were home. They were grounded because of COVID. But, you know, the people we didn't get, there's a lot of people I really wanted. But, you know, I'm a God-fearing man. My mom is a prayer warrior. Her candles she light are amazing. So I was like, look, Ma, I like them candles. And Lord, whoever you want in this documentary, you put in it. Because I wanted everybody. But, of course, you can't have everybody. You know, you have people, you know, you have a certain list. When somebody else writing a check, you kind of got, you know, a bunch of things you got to, you know, hurdles and hoops you got to jump through. So I just said, Lord, whoever you want in this documentary, you put in it. Whoever you don't want in it, then don't put in it. And I didn't take anything personal from people who passed. It's just, it wasn't their thing. And I ain't mad at them at all. I pass with some things sometimes. So I'm appreciative that they even got back to me. And just appreciative, very appreciative to everybody who came through. It was like, hey, yeah, I'll help you tell this story. So that was just an amazing thing to have that love come back. I forgot the question you asked me.
Yeah, well, I'm curious, what happened after Fat Tuesdays in the LA comedy scene, or, you know, are there a bunch of other nights and things like that people did in other places? Like what happened after?
So Fat Tuesdays started a ripple effect. Fat Tuesdays was really the first successful urban night, black night in an A room, a white comedy club, a mainstream comedy club. So when those comedians I spoke of earlier would come from Miami and Cincinnati and Chicago and Dallas and New York and DC, when they would come to LA to Fat Tuesdays and saw what I was doing there at the Comedy Store, which was a white club basically, they go back to their cities and start their own urban nights. Because it was Fat Tuesdays first, and then the Improv started, you know, Freaky Mondays. That was another white club in Hollywood. And the Improv is a chain. For those of you who know, some of y'all have Improvs in your city or a Funny Bone. You know,
yeah, I'm in DC.
One of my favorite clubs, the DC Improv. Oh, I love that club. But they started urban nights because the Improv saw how much money they were making after modeling their night after Fat Tuesdays. And then the Laugh Factory started Chocolate Sundays. Chris Spencer, Corey Miller started at the Improv, the Freaky Monday spot, and then it just started a ripple effect. So you start seeing these urban nights popping up in white clubs all over the country, and I was happy because I'm like, now black comedians have an A room to go work out in. Because sometimes, you know, people, if you're not in the main club, especially white people, they don't consider you a real comedian, and that's what I got when I got to LA. Oh, you're a comedian? Oh, when I got to see you at the Comedy Store, the Laugh Factory, Improv, like I'm not. And they look at you like, oh, well, you ain't doing comedy then, if you just in the hood, because we ain't coming there. So it was cool that these other nights started their night, and it wasn't a competition. I would promote the other nights, you know, Chocolate Sundays. You know, I would promote Mo Better Mondays. They never promoted me, but I didn't care. It was about the culture. It wasn't about a competition. It was about the culture. So I made sure that if people want to see comedy on a Sunday night, they go down the street to the Laugh Factory for Chocolate Sundays. If they want to see comedy on a Monday night, they go 2 miles over to the Improv for Freaky Mondays, now Mo Better Mondays, now D-Ray Mondays. So every week, you know, every night, I almost had a night. Kim Whitley and Buddy Lewis started Wednesdays, called Whacked Out Wednesdays, on a Wednesday night. So now you had Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, you know, for comedy in A rooms, because the weekends they were putting up, you know, the white headliners and everything like that. But yeah, it started a whole revolution. Now at the Comedy Store, There's no Fat Tuesdays, but there's a Tripping on Thursdays now, which is an urban night, which is in their smaller room, the belly room, where Fat Tuesday started. But there's other nights that came out the Fat Tuesdays at the Comedy Store. Tripping on Tuesdays. Jeru Tillman, who's an executive producer of All Def Comedy, started Tripping on Tuesdays with a good friend of mine who I had booking Fat Tuesdays, Gooch, Charles Patrick Gooch, rest in peace. He started Tripping on Tuesdays at the Comedy Store on Tuesday nights, and that ran for a while. So there were kids and grandkids of Fat Tuesdays.
That's amazing. And it's amazing to have created something that has such a strong legacy that you have to tie things back to where it came from. And I do think that without this documentary, maybe people wouldn't even realize that, right? Because again, I'm 43, grew up on a lot of these people, but I didn't even know about it. I wasn't in LA then. I never got to LA until the 2000s. I didn't even know anything about this. And I just didn't know anything about the scene. So, from a historical standpoint, I learned so much. And it gives me perspective on all the things I do know now, all the places I have been, the comedians I have seen, because they're all in the documentary talking about being there and their own futures and things like that. So
and there's so many more we didn't get the chance to talk to that I wanted to talk to, but we had limited time, we had limited, budget,
right,
and only a limited amount of spots. But there's more. Fat Tuesdays is a franchise, and it's not stopping just at the documentary. So those comedians who didn't get a chance to be in this first, season of Fat Tuesdays will definitely come to get you for the others. And what I love about what the Fat Tuesday documentary did was it inspired this new generation. When I go to New York and I go to other cities and the young comics, man, I saw your doc. I had no idea, OG. I didn't know. Thank you, man. You inspired me. I'm gonna start my own comedy night. And so I'm getting that a lot. And for these new generations to see where, comedy was and where it is today, which leads us, I'm sure, to our next topic, is where comedy is today and where it's going on in the future.
Yeah, perfect segue, because I have a couple. You can't talk comedy nowadays without talking cancel culture and social media. The way this a new crop of comedy. But I'm curious. I mean, as somebody who grew up watching the old comedy specials of the 90s and stuff like that, I still remember where I was when I saw Chris Rock's Bring the Pain the first time. Watching that with my parents was very awkward, by the way. Do you think this kind of cancel culture, do you think that's a real thing? Like, is it impacting the way comics do business nowadays, do you think?
Fuck cancel culture. Cancel these nuts.
There you go.
All right, cancel that. God can cancel me. I can cancel me. My fan base is strong enough to, if y'all ain't rocking with me, not my fan base, but those who don't like something I may have said off color, then my fan base will support me. And here's the thing. Prayerfully, my fan base will support me. Here's the thing about cancel culture. Somebody can have a whole career you can be a fan of somebody their whole career, right? And they've done great things in the space. They've done great things for the community. They've done great things, charity work and everything. And they say one thing that you don't like. You liked everything else they did for years. And the one thing that you don't like, that one joke or one comment that may have offended you, you want to cancel everything they've done, the whole career, the sacrifices they make, the food they put on the table for their kids. No one's perfect. We're going to say some things off color. Remember, comedians are dark, twisted, fucked up individuals. All right? We come from dark places. Our comedy is our mask. That's our way of coping with the dark and the pain we have on the inside. And sometimes, guess what? That darkness is going to come out. We're going to say some things off color that we may have misspoke or misstepped or whatever. But it happens. You've done that in your own life. Just period. People, not you, but people, period. So to cancel somebody's whole career off of that, it's ridiculous. Especially when they're doing such great work in the community. So you stop that. You stop that flow. When they got kids to feed, you stop that flow. And pretty much we police ourselves a lot. But every once in a while, even the police fuck up. Well, I take that back. All the time police fuck up. So the whole cancel culture needs to stop. It needs to stop.
So do you think it's actually negatively impacting? So, and I asked this question because So for instance, the Aries Spears stepped in recently with his Lizzo comments and things like that. But there's always this discussion kind of, it's like a cloud. It's always present. But I always wonder if the people, like, is this impacting comedians or I guess artists in general in a way, like your fan base, for instance, you have a fan base and they've been rocking with you for however long. They attend the shows, they come to the shows. Do you think people aren't coming to your shows now that because of maybe something you may have said, or do you think people aren't coming to folk shows? Because it seems like a lot of the people that speak about it the most are still doing fine. And maybe it's because they have a big enough fan base where it's okay. But I guess I just wonder, and this is a conversation we always have about cancel culture. Like, is it a real thing or is it something we're creating by talking about it more? Like, do you see it having an impact at shows that are being done and stuff like that?
Look, if I say something off color, and which I have, and which I probably will do, I'm an emotional guy and a sensitive guy. Any comedian that tells you they're not emotional or not sensitive is a liar. Or not a little bit narcissistic, they're a liar. We're all kind of narcissistic. We're all kind of emotional. We're all sensitive. A lot of us can take it and we can't dish it. I mean, we can dish it, but we can't take it, and we hide it, we mask it. But inside, we hurt too. It's just how well you can mask it or it's you can only pretend for so long, in a lot of situations. So it's cancel culture, man, in my humble opinion, I could be wrong, are people who jealous. Maybe you didn't follow your dream. Maybe you hadn't figured out the gift God gave you and you're not winning at your gift, and now you just want to make someone else's life miserable. A lot of times when we say something off color, most of the times there's no ill intent behind it. There's no malice behind it. We just have a weird way of looking at the world. We have a twisted sense of humor. And most times you love it, but you're not going to love it every time. I start my show off with look, I'm unfiltered. If you're sensitive, this ain't the show for you. Those are my first words out of my mouth. Everybody's not going to like me. Everybody's not going to be a fan of Guy Torry. And that's cool. And you're not a hater. You just don't like my brand of comedy. And I'm not mad at you for that. Comedy is subjective. If everybody liked my brand of comedy, I would sell out stadiums. But I get that I'm in a certain niche. And if you haven't seen me live, come see me live and check me out live. Don't go online and watch me. Most stuff I didn't put out there anyway. But come see me live and make your determination, at that point. So cancel culture just needs to stop. But look, none of us are perfect. Only perfect man ever walked this earth was Jesus. And even he disobeyed his dad and his mom and went to the temple, and ran off. So let's just stop with this cancel culture crap, man. And I haven't given it any thoughts at all. I'm the same comedian that was with the same foul, potty, filthy, unfiltered, unapologetic mouth I had in 1992, and I'm not stopping.
Fair enough. What is your take on the current social media has created what seems to be like an entire new crop of content creators? And I'm not even sure they'd all call themselves comedians, but there's a ton of funny content online, right? People find ways to be funny in 3 seconds and 2 minutes. I mean, it's amazing. It's like everybody's a sketch comedy artist nowadays on social media. Like, what do you think that says about the future of comedy? Like, there's clearly a different lane between stand-up comics and content creators, right? And people who are doing this stuff online, which, maybe lead to the same place in different ways. I mean, opportunities in TVs and movies and things like that. But how do you feel about social media content creators and that lane of comedy and where that's taking the comedy game?
Every era in stand-up comedy has its portal, its way in. It used to be the late night talk shows back in the 60s and 70s and then the 80s came and you had the comedy specials and things like that. I had Def Comedy Jam, BET's Comic View. That was our portal. And now this new portal is social media. And a lot of the old heads, and especially in my generation, the generation before me, a lot of them they kind of look down on, this new generation, which I embrace it. I'm like, look, this is their new portal. This is where comedy has gone. And you got to respect it because that's a different skill in itself. To be able, what these millennials and people in my generation too are who are adopting it and adapting to the new system, and some of the generation Y and all the other generations, the Xers and all that stuff, what they are doing to me is incredible. To do a funny sketch, I don't care if it takes 300 takes or whatever to do it right. They're still creating their own opportunities, which is great. They've been able to find another way in. And I think it's great. I'm still trying to figure it out. So I applaud these new generation of comedians. And if you ever and Bob Sumner, I'm gonna say that name, Bob Sumner, who booked every comedian you've ever seen on Def Comedy Jam, basically, calls them social medians. And if you ever hear that term anywhere else, it came from Bob Sumner. But that's the correct term for them, social medians, because all of them don't do stand up. Some are just social medians. They on social media doing comedy, it's not stand up, but it's sketch comedy, or it's whatever it is. It's confessionals, whatever. It's funny. I laugh at a lot of it, and I applaud it. Now, the ones who do cross over into stand up, what my generation and before just wants you to do is get the reps in, get on stage and master the art of stand up. Then you have the best of both worlds. Because a lot of these social medians are crossing over into stand-up, which is cool. Come on. I ain't mad at you. You're not taking any dates away from me. So come on, but be true to the game and steady the craft and get those reps in on stage, even when you're not getting paid. Put the work in. Put the time in. Because what happens is, every time I'm on stage, I feel like I'm carrying the torch for live stand-up comedy. So I'm trying to make sure my show is 1,000%. I'm gonna go all in, balls to the wall, because I want the experience to be great. And because you never know who's coming to a comedy show for the first time in their life. And I want to convert them into a regular stand-up audience, a live comedy audience, so they can come next week and see my man Tony Rock, or the next week and see Joe Torry, or the next week and see Miss Pretty Ricky, or the next week and see Carlos Miller, or DC Youngblood, Cedric Entertainer, DL. I want you to keep coming to see live comedy. So what's happening is some of the social medians aren't ready for that stage, and they're headlining, and someone's coming to a comedy show for the first time, and their first impression of live stand-up is somebody that ain't ready. Somebody's supposed to do 45 to 50 minutes to an hour, and after 5 or 6 minutes in, they shot their load. They done. Now they got another 45 minutes of bullshit, and that's somebody's first impression of what live stand-up is, and that's not a good impression. So we just want them to get the reps in so that they can keep the club open for us when we come in and show them, and that's why I try to talk to this young generation. I'm on the road, man, a lot. I see a lot of young black talent out across the country, man, that I talk to, the black ones. I talk to the black comedians and tell them what they're doing wrong if they're welcoming to it. Some of them are like, oh, whatever, OG, this is a new school. But the ones who embrace it, DC Youngfly years ago was one of those young guys who used to ask questions. What's AOG? What's the premise, OG? What's this, OG? And somebody like that who studies the game and want to learn the game, then you like, okay, yeah, I got these jewels for you, because Chris Rock and Joe Torry and Martin Lawrence and T.K. Kirkland and Yvette Wilson and Adele Givens and Ricky Harris, they did it for me when I was coming up. So, I have to pay it forward, and I have to put them jewels out there. So Jules, I want to say, and I'll make sure I pronounce my L's, Jules. so these young comedians, so I can preserve the future of black stand-up comedy. I want to do my part.
That's appreciated, because I there's definitely, this. Like, I watch a lot of social medians, as you say, and then I have gone to comedy shows where those same people are on stage, and I'm always impressed by those who can transition from doing a 5-minute video that's hilarious, that you can tell they put a work in, but go stand on stage and perform and give you, some real quality material and all that. Like, I'm always appreciative of that.
My agent, Tamara Goins, who's a comedy goddess of an innovative artist, she said it's funny because when the whole YouTube thing started, they did some test runs with some YouTube comedians, and she said it's easy to take a comic and make them a YouTube star, but it's hard to take a YouTube star and make them a comic.
All right, well, we're going to take one last break here, and then we're going to come back with two of my favorite segments here on Dear Culture, which is our Black Fashions and our Black Recommendations. We're still here with God Torry. Stay tuned. All right, we're back here in Dear Culture with God Torry, and we're going to do some of my favorite segments. But before we get that, I do have one last question for you. As somebody who's been in the game for a long time, who's seen a lot, who's responsible for a lot of things happening, I'd be curious if you can give me, let's say, 5 of your top Black comedy cultural moments.
I can do that. I had to start with Flip Wilson because he was one of the first Black comedians who had his sketch show. The Flip Wilson show. So that was very important and very impactful because it showed the world that we can do sketch comedy as well as stand-up comedy. And that era where he was doing it was groundbreaking. And that's what inspired Richard Pryor when he had his variety show, The Richard Pryor Show, which, of course, went on to inspire, In Living Color, Chappelle's Show, and all of that. So Flip Wilson, I would have to say. I would have to say Eddie Murphy, what he did on Saturday Night Live, and, starting in stand-up and then going to Saturday Night Live, SNL, making that groundbreaking. He wasn't the first Black to be on there, but what he did with it as a stand-up comic, Garrett Morris was on there as well, who's also a stand-up. But Eddie Murphy took that to a whole nother level, and then he took comedy to a rock star level.
Yeah, go to the hot tub.
He made stand-up comedy sexy, in arenas and big theaters with the leather on, and he made it sexy. He made it, fashionable. So I say just Eddie Murphy alone, and then transferring over into, film is just incredible. And then a producer and it's just crazy. Def Comedy Jam, groundbreaking. It inspired, like I said earlier in this program, it was a Moses, took a lot of brothers to the promised land. It took Black comedy and put it in white people's living room because it was on HBO, if you remember, and a lot of Black people didn't have cable. A lot of Black areas didn't have cable television. So the ratings were high. Why? Because white people were watching. So it took Black comedy with Russell Simmons and Stan Lathan and Bob Sumner and Sandy Wernick. What they did was they put it right front and center in white living rooms. And that was groundbreaking to me. Fat Tuesdays. I gotta give Fat Tuesdays that shout out because it brought the hood to Hollywood, and it was an extension of everything I named before because we started doing sketches at Fat Tuesdays as well. So that's from the Flip Wilson era and the Def Jam era, and then I gotta say the Kings of Comedy. Kings of Comedy took comedy back to that rock star level that Eddie Murphy had started. I was the first host of the Kings of Comedy tour. It was me, Cedric, Bernie, and Steve Harvey, Bernie Mac, that is rest in peace. And I was young. I was doing comedy 5 years. I was more like the prince of the Kings of Comedy tour. I wasn't a king, but it was just a great ride, and that was groundbreaking. And I have to throw a couple of honorable mentions. I know you said 5. I got to do Queens of Comedy. Queens of Comedy showed that women are funny too, and they can hold and sustain, a tour on their own. So that was great.
Our sister will get the last word on your ass, baby. We can be in a goddamn coma. We gonna say our shit. He be like, bitch, don't you say nothing else. Mm-hmm.
And then I have to say, Comic View. Comic View was Def Jam, but for the family.
Oh, yeah, I let my girlfriend set me up with a man. She said he was a sugar daddy. Oh, girl, he a sugar daddy. He a sugar daddy. Man didn't have no money. He was a sweet and low daddy.
You sit down with your kids and watch these comedians because it's wholesome entertainment. So right. Comic View get honorable mention, which was inspired by Def Jam, and the Queens of Comedy, which was inspired by the Kings of Comedy. So those two honorable mentions, but those are my top. If I had to say top 7, my top 7 greatest moments or impactful moments in stand-up comedy. For me, in my humble opinion.
I just thought of this last question I'm going to ask you before we get into the other segments. While you were talking, what's the thing that you're most proud of that you've been able to do in your career? Because you've seen so much and you've been around for so long and you've been a part of so much. Like, is there something that stands out above everything else that you're most proud of that you were able to accomplish through your career or through the things that you've done?
30 years I've been in this business. All the movies I've done, all the tours I've done, all the TV shows I've done, all the stand-up shows I've done, even Fat Tuesdays, and all the legendary people I've met in this business. The most thing I'm most happy about and glad I was able to do was my brother and I buy our parents a house. Was move them out of the hood and say, y'all need to retire. Joe and I are going to buy you a house. And to be able to return that gift, hands down, beats anything in Hollywood has ever done for me. So people, if you're in that position to take care of your parents and say thank you, parents who never ask for a thing. My parents never asked for anything but just don't embarrass them and keep God first. That's the only two things they've ever asked us.
That's a very black thing for parents to say. Don't embarrass me and keep God
and
first.
not in that
very
order,
black.
but that was it. So if you're able to be in that position to take care of your parents, man, it's the most fulfilling thing you will ever do in your life.
All right. Well, we're coming to a close in this show, but we have two last segments that I want to ask you. We ask every guest that we have. And we're going to start with our Black Fashion, which is a confession about your blackness, typically something people wouldn't expect. Some black folks don't like chicken. Amazingly, a ton of people have not seen The Color Purple or Friday. It blows my mind. But do you have a Black Fashion?
I call it Guys Got a Gripe. Guys Got a Gripe, Black Fashion, and it's with we cry about white privilege all the time. And yes, a lot of white people have white privilege. But we don't speak about black privilege. And my gripe is with black people about black privilege.
Okay.
Privilege. And black privilege is, because it's a black-owned business, you expect a free handout or a discount. Negro, please. Just because you black and I'm black, why should I have to give you a discount? Why can't you support the black business? Support it. We don't go out of business if we keep giving all the stuff away for free. Oh, I'm going to support you. In my comedy shows, I don't mind giving out free tickets. It's okay sometimes. But when you got the same people every time asking for free tickets, oh, I'm going to support you. I need 4 tickets. I'm supporting you. You ain't paying for them tickets. I'm supporting you. I don't mind sometimes, but every time, if I offer, that's one thing. If I offer something, one thing. Even if it's a black business owner, a lot of times I get offered stuff for free. I said, no, I want to pay. I want to support, because you got to stay in business. I can afford to. God has blessed me with enough income to be able to support your black business. Now, am I going to go out and support every black business? No, because some of y'all suck. I'm just going to be honest with you. Some of your black businesses, you ain't doing business well. But if you're doing black business well, I'm going to support you, period. But it got to be something I like. I'm not going to do it just because. But my problem is, my gripe is, my black fashion is, look, support black people, man. Quit looking for a handout or a hookup because we both black. You know the struggle. Yeah, and I'm struggling probably because of your black ass. So guys got a gripe. Support each other. Quit looking for a goddamn handout.
Fair enough. I do the same thing. I have a friend who has a restaurant, and every time I go in, a good friend of mine, he's always like, I'm going to give you discounts. Like, brother, I want to pay the full price, because if I don't pay the full price, then you're going to go out of business, right? So stop giving people, I tell them all the time, stop giving people discounts. If we love you, we're going to pay it, because that's the price you put on the menu. Either I'm going to pay it or I'm just not going to show up.
Some black businesses, some of these black restaurants, some of y'all need to be giving your food away free, because some of that's mama recipe, but mama couldn't cook. So...
Don't get yourself in no trouble. We just talked about cancel culture. We just talked about it. All right. Well, the last segment we're going to do is a black recommendation, which is a recommendation about something for, by, and about black people, black culture. Do you have a black recommendation for people?
Air hip hop comedy. If you haven't seen it yet, you got to see it. It's a part of history. It's a part of our culture. And not only that, though, it's just not. Some people have told me, man, I watched it 3 times. I've watched it 2 times. Man, I tell other people about it. And that's what we need to do, man, is start watching each other's projects and films and documentaries, but Fat Tuesdays, I recommend it highly, not just because I've done it, but some of your favorite comedians that you grew up on or you enjoy today are in this documentary. They're in this documentary. So it's on Amazon Prime. And when you watch it, make sure you rate it. If you liked it, then say you liked it. 3 stars, 4 stars, 5 stars, thumbs up, thumbs down, whatever. But just go rate it. And that's how it stays on the platform. It stays on Prime. And so just watch it over and over again. Right. Promote it. Tell people about it. And tell me what you like about it. Follow me on Instagram at Guy Torry, GuyTorry. And tell me what you thought about the documentary. Tell me what you think about this interview. And if you're in a city where I'm coming to, come to my show. Come see it live. All right? Come see it live. There's nothing like live stand-up comedy. Guy Torry Show is the best damn comedy show, period. And I'm the only comic that travels with a guarantee. When you come to the Guy Torry Comedy Show, if you don't have a good time, I'm always in the lobby after the show. Come up to me with your ticket stub and say, Guy, I did not laugh. I will take you back to the box office myself, and I will show you the sign that says, no refund, get your ass out of here.
And I can appreciate that, brother. I genuinely do. And I'm going to echo what you said about the documentary. Like, genuinely, I enjoyed it. I've watched it multiple times because I'm a Black history person, and I love Black storytelling, hence Dear Culture, hence being here at theGrio. Having a podcast that's about Black culture, like, I genuinely enjoyed it. And more people, everybody needs to see it, especially if you're into Black comedy. But even if you're not, it's about Blackness. And it's about a Black era. It's about Black culture, and everybody needs to take a look at this documentary.
And stay tuned for the book, because there's so many rich stories that we didn't get to or had to cut out. And stay tuned for the Fat Tuesdays podcast. A lot of comedians you didn't hear from that want to be heard from, and we're going to address that. So the Fat Tuesday podcast coming soon, and the Fat Tuesdays book coming soon.
That's awesome. Well, thank you, Guy Torry, for taking some time out of your busy day to tell us about your documentary, give us your opinions about some things, give us a Black fashion, Black recommendation, and for your contributions to the culture. Like, genuinely, you're appreciated. Plus, like I said, you're a part of one of my favorite movies of all time, Trippin', that everybody also needs to see. You got quotables on quotables. So thank you so much for your time, for your gifts, for your contributions. You are appreciated, sir. And before we get out of here, I have Maisha Kai here, who is the host of Writing Black with Maisha Kai, one of the other shows on the theGrio Black Podcast Network, one of my favorite people. We just got finished talking to Guy Torry, noted comedian, somebody who's been around forever. We talked about the past, the present, and the future of comedy. And I know you recently had Sam J on your show, who was a name on TV and comedy and everything. What was that like?
I would definitely say Sam J is really giving us an authentic glimpse at the current state of comedy. And I would say that she's the future. I really, she's such a character. I think, we're so used to seeing her be such a character. She's such a big presence on her show, Pause with Sam J. If you've seen Bust Down as well, she's just like her sense of humor is just, it's out of control. She actually, I found her to be really transparent, really grounded, really, one of the things that was really cool about talking to her, she was so introspective. We always talk about, obviously there's two sides of comedy always, these deep interior lives that really feed this sense of humor. And she really gave us a lot of that. So it was a really cool conversation to have. By the way, you're one of my favorite people too. So thank you for that.
Thank you so much. You have no idea how much that warms my heart. And speaking of warm hearts, though not at all, I know you also recently had a superstar from my world. I'm a Black movie, not just a Black movie, it's a movie, cinema savant.
Yes.
But I specialize in Black cinema. And Omar Epps, you just recently talked to, is a superstar in that world by all accounts. So what was that like? Yes,
I did. And, yes, Omar Epps has been on our screens. You had Guy Torry. This is, been on our screens at least as long as Guy Torry, right? We're talking Juice, we're talking The Wood, Love and Basketball, the list goes on. I was just watching him on Power, Raising Kanan last week. So, he's doing the thing, but I did not know that he's also an author. I mean, or he is now. So yeah, he's doing kind of this like Afrofuturist YA fantasy called Nubia. That is, I mean, I really didn't expect this. It's kind of this multi-layered, kind of utopian or dystopian fantasy, which, is really something we're seeing a lot of these days. We're seeing so many people walking in these footsteps that had been laid so long ago by like Octavia Butler and, people like that. You've got N.K. Jemisin, you've got, just so many folks in this space right now doing really dope stuff and really kind of placing us in these landscapes that we have not traditionally seen ourselves.
We were at this book convention at the Jacob Javits Center, and there were like hundreds of kids lined up, on this one line, and I was like, "Well, what's that for?" And they were like, "Oh, that's the young adult sci-fi." I forget the author's name, forgive me, but they're like huge in the space, and the people I was with were like explaining to me like, they're a rock star, these kids. And I was like blown away, like, wow, kids still read books. And so when I went to the hotel that night, it was the light bulb moment, of Nubia, the Awakening. I like I said, it'd been sitting in my head, and it was just something, a voice was tapping me on the shoulder, said, "Hey, it's time to unearth this and figure it out, because there is an audience for it, and they are rabid, they're dedicated, they're loyal." I didn't know that, in this particular form.
So that was exciting. It was really dope to talk to him. He's a very, very thoughtful. He has a lot of ideas. He's kind of like you. He got a lot of ideas. And if folks haven't tuned into that episode yet, I highly recommend it, because you really get this total different perspective on Omar Epps.
I was going to ask you, but I guess we need to tune into the episode to find out. Because I'm like,
yes.
Wait, so he's writing YA books and
I mean, yeah, he has a collaborator. Well, it could be. For all we know, I mean, this is Omar Epps, so we could just see this come to the screen soon, because that seems to be the trend these days as well. A lot more books
Facts.
making it to screen these days. He didn't give me too much on that, but I do think that this is intended to be the first of many, if he can kind of get this thing going. So, excited. I love a multifaceted talent. So very cool to see that he's doing that.
I'm sure you do as a multifaceted talent yourself. I'm sure you can see that in other people, so he wrote a book about fatherhood, right? If I'm not mistaken.
Now he did. You're right. So I guess you're right. He was already an author. He had written a memoir on fatherhood. I think it was actually called From Fatherless to Fatherhood, kind of chronicling his own experiences growing up without his father in his life, and how, that has informed his entire life, and now his life as a father. So yes, my bad on that. Yes, he was already an author, but we all know there's a world of difference between talking about your own world and creating a new world. So I did not expect this turn from him. I mean, I would have expected like, a true Hollywood story or, something along those lines, but this is dope. I mean, I think I like to see more of this. I love seeing us kind of stretch into these new, I can't say it's new for us. Afrofuturism, has been around as long as Black folks have, but seeing us be visible in those spaces, I'm here for it.
I agree completely. I love that. I love that artists that you wouldn't typically see in these spaces showing up in new places and hopefully being successful and, brilliant in those spaces as well. So that's really dope. Like I'm looking forward to checking out the episode and what he's got coming.
Yeah, I think the book is really a manifestation of a lot of like spiritual beliefs that he holds. So again, if you are an Omar Epps fan, highly recommend the episode, highly recommend the book, because you will see a totally different side of this much beloved actor.
Where can the people find this episode with Omar Epps?
Now, you know where they can find it. They can find it where they can find all of our amazing podcast talents at theGrio on theGrio Black Podcast Network or anywhere else you find your podcast.
Absolutely. So that's Writing Black with Maisha Kai. one of the wonderful podcasts that we have here on the GRIO Black Podcast Network, along with my show, Dear Culture.
That's right.
And the GRIO Daily with Michael Harriet and a bunch of other podcasts, Acting Up with Courtney Wills. Like, we have a bunch of podcasts here that are dope that I can't wait for everybody to fully experience, because we're doing some amazing Black work here. It's amazing work that's very Black. How about we put it that way?
I think that's exactly how we should put it. So many podcasts, so many personalities.
Absolutely. Well, thank you, Maisha, for sharing a little bit about what you have coming up, a little bit about the conversation you had with Omar Epps. You're much appreciated. Everybody listening is much appreciated. Thank you so much for tuning in, for sleepwalking with the kid, for listening and hopefully enjoying to these podcasts we have here. You know, please send all criticisms, suggestions, email scams, lottery scams, anything that you have to podcast@thegrio.com. Dear Culture is an original podcast of the GRIO Black Podcast Network and is produced by Sasha Armstrong. It is edited by Cameron Blackwell. The logistic associate producer, I'm going to get that right one of these days, is Taji Sr. And Regina Griffin is our managing editor of the podcast. So thanks for tuning in. Thanks for checking us out. Stay Black.
The GRIO Black Podcast Network is here. Everything you've been waiting for. Black culture amplified. Find your voice on the Black Podcast Network. Listen today on the GRIO mobile app and tune in everywhere great podcasts are heard.